Oh, the humanity. F1 news and updates on the 17th of the 3rd, 2025. The time is 17 minutes past 10. This is chaos. Chat, there are too many threads at which we need to pull. I've got to talk about my soliloquy yesterday declaring Lando as Lando 2.0, capable of challenging for a championship over the course of the ensuing 23 races. I think we need to reappraise that ever so slightly. I mean, the beauty of having a mind is the ability to change it. No, we will talk about that. There's some things about Concord Agreement that we'll touch on very briefly. So too, Laura Winters has destroyed the one that they call Helmut Marko. We'll talk about that because Laura had something else to say over the course of this Grand Prix weekend, which I feel will highlight some of the agency double standard protectionism as far as these guys and girls' jobs. So too, we'll talk about Oscar Piastri coming out. In fact, let's do that first. Oscar Piastri, home Grand Prix, but for a cheeky mistake. Some people will say that he would have won 25 points, right? And it's techie as far as Oscar, not long having signed a brand new contract. And then this happens, cheeky mistake of the unforced variety, and he's left in the gravel doing one of these. Roll the clip. I mean, in the first instance, let me put some commentary on this. In the first instance, the fact that he knows to reverse out rather than trying to go forward, instead of doing a Lance Stroll in 2024, he's god tier of an F1 mind, right? Knows that momentum is key and that he's got a better chance of getting out of the beached green stuff by reversing back up. Oscar Piastri gets it done. However, as genius as that is, as street smarts as that is from Oscar Piastri, and shout out to FewCollar227 on Reddit for the footage, as genius as that is, we're already asking questions about driver hierarchy. Now, McLaren said that, listen, stand by Oscar, there's no need to challenge Lando, not at this point. Zach Brown pre-race said, listen, we go racing, we're McLaren. Let those two decide who's going to be the principal as far as the drivers' championship. These two things are at odds. Chat, are they not? We come to realise this morning, per Joe Saywood, that extension in Lando Norris's contract through to 2028 is not ironclad. It only goes through to 2026 when the all-important engine manufacturer hierarchy will kick in. We will know more. Then let me tell you about one Maximilian. In fact, before we come to Max, I'm going to tell you about Laura Winter, God tier F1 journal, and she said of Helmut Marko the following: that there's no place for such criticism of Isaac Hadjar. You saw Isaac Hadjar crying in his helmet, getting hugged by Sir Lewis Hamilton's dad, the one that they call Anthony, and it was a scene, right? It was emotive. But I've argued already that Isaac Hadjar, if he had any nouns, if there were anything in his noggin, pull down your visor and you avoid all of this polemic. No, nobody would have known. You won't be the first driver, Isaac Hadjar, to have cried a cheeky tear and pulled down the visor, kept the helmet on, and nobody would have been the wiser. Isaac didn't do that. It was visor up settings and hand inside the helmet, almost telegraphing the fact that he was devastated at his poor performance, rookie settings, cancelling his first race in kind, yeeting it into the barrier before we even had lights out. Not a good look. To which one Helmut Marko, Dr. Helmut Marko, Red Bull GmbH, responded as follows: That whole Hadjar scenario was a bit embarrassing. No one wants to see that. There's no time. We don't have any time as Red Bull Racing Technologies for that sort of stuff. We're invested in results. Now you can see how that might appear insensitive to some, not least Laura Winter F1 journo, who said of Helmut Marko's criticism of the young Isaac Hadjar, Le Petit Professeur, that there is no place for that sort of stuff in F1. That young rookies need to be allowed to show their emotions and not chastised for it. Interesting from Laura Winter. You guys know that I consume all the F1 content that I can get my hands on with a view to distill it for you on the Cameron CC channel. Not long ago, 72 hours I want to say, Laura Winter was on F1 Nation talking about George Russell versus Max Verstappen beef, that George Russell had said, you know what, I'm going to stand up to Max Verstappen. That's who I am. My family wouldn't have it from me if I had it from him. That's in my DNA, George said. I'm going hard for Max Verstappen. I want to win 25 points every single race weekend, and I won't sacrifice that at the altar of being passive. Laura Winter, when recounting this, was quite clear. She said, George said this, George said this. George said that Max was a bully. It's not me saying it, it's George saying it. And I thought the fact that she wanted to emphasise that was quite interesting. It feels like the landscape as far as journos are scared to talk about Max Verstappen. Even if there is a semblance of truth, which of course there is. Max Verstappen goes hard in the paint each and every single time. But Laura Winter withdrew from saying that and wanted to put George Russell's name on that bullet instead of hers. Super interesting, that a massive change in tack now that Helmut Marko is the subject topic and not Maximilian Verstappen. Go and check out that latest edition of F1 Nation. God tier. Right, let me tell you about Lando and Max, because there is hope yet for one Maximilian Verstappen. Let me show you this piece of footage. Again, courtesy of Mary PSM on F1 Reddit. What do you see here, chat? What do you see here? Let's go again. This is all important turn 11 offs, right? Look at Lando. The second time, is Lando inducing that oversteer deliberately? That's the question. Because if he is, then that's a god tier piece of initial de-racing there. Of course, if he's done it deliberately, he'll be inducing that angle so that he can make the ensuing corner. That's what Oscar Piastri failed to do. And that's why he was in the mud. If Lando's done that deliberately, cognitively, with a view to set him up for the ensuing turn, I mean, Lando Norris 2.0 is in play, chat. Like, take that to the bank. That's god tier from Lando. Now, we said, you know what I said yesterday, that potentially Lando is ready, that he's good to go for a championship based upon a couple different things. He said in the press conference that I am Lando 2.0, not those words, but if in effect, he said that that was a new circumstance, consolidating for the pole on the first lap and holding off a fire-breathing dragon in Maximilian Verstappen for the latter stages of the Grand Prix, changeable conditions, making the right decision, the exact thing that he didn't manage to do in 2021 at Sochi, listening to his team, collaborative effort, and happening upon the right lap, lap 45, to come in and change for new tyres. All good. Tick, tick, tick. However, there's a prevailing school of thought in the community, much more learned F1 minds than mine, that think Lando Norris benefited. He was dining at the altar of fortuitous circumstances, meaning therefore that the racing gods smiled down upon him on a couple of fronts. Firstly, we learn later that Max Verstappen's mistake wasn't just a Max Verstappen mistake. It was at the altar of degradation, that his tyres had overheated. But for that, you know, Max Verstappen's not going to make a mistake like that. Not an uncharacteristic one like that. An error of the unforced variety. There's your first fortuitous circumstance, because but for that cheeky error, an uncharacteristic one by Mr. Verstappen in a rain-strewn circumstance, you would argue that Max would be much closer. Second thing, if we're talking fortuitous circumstances, GP and Red Bull and Hannah Schmitz thought potentially there was the hope for a safety car, not even a safety car, a red flag, and that potentially they would have had another Brazil 2024, another free change of tyres. Had they followed Lando Norris and not kept Max Verstappen out, again, Houston, we have a problem as far as Lando Norris winning that race. You can argue just because of those small variable changes, Max Verstappen would have nailed himself 25 points. Oh, and by the way, you heard Lando Norris's guys, his race engineer, begging him to reel it back in. You don't need to push so hard, Lando. The car will do all of the work for you if you let it. That tells us two things. The extent of the delta that the MCL39 has over the RB21, one, and the fact that Lando was pushing too hard, that he was feeling the pressure of a fire-breathing dragon in Maximilian Verstappen. That's why he made the bloody mistake that damaged, materially so, his underbelly, the underfloor of the car. Lando Norris was feeling it. He will feel lucky this morning to get away with 25 points on the back of that performance that he put on at Albert Park yesterday, for it was chaos. One of these ones where you see the duck above the surface, looks all cool and calm. Underneath the surface though, Lando Norris's duck legs were flapping kicking, hence the damage, hence the errors of the unforced variety. That's why it was so bloody important that they pitted at exactly the right time. Therein lies the durable competitive advantage that allowed Lando to get over the line and get himself 25 points. It wasn't as simple as it looked, chat. I'm telling you, Lando 2.0, ready for the championship potentially. But over the course of the next 3 or 4 races, Helmut Marko says, worry not, Mr. Verstappen, even foursome say soon to be 5-time champion, because we have upgrades are coming. They understand, Red Bull, that they need to fix for some of the travails of that car. Still understeery, still snap oversteered, still temperamental, still very mercurial, still too hard on its tyres as versus the MCL 3.9 iteration of McLaren, and that all plays a part in the story that was Albert Park. If, chat, here's my principal supposition for you, if Red Bull can fix for these things and continue to leverage the joker that is Maximilian Verstappen, normalise for the rain, normalise for the fact that McLaren aren't necessarily very good around Albert Park if past is prologue, then going into China and Suzuka, some are saying that you could argue that Max Verstappen will be a lot closer to Lando Norris and OJ Piastri, particularly as it looks like McLaren still haven't sorted out their driver hierarchy just yet, still prone to a cheeky mistake, particularly if the racing gods aren't smiling as brightly on them in China and Suzuka as they were at Albert Park. Oh, the humanity.